Planning to travel? We've got a scam you need to know about. It could threaten your life. One couple's harrowing escape. Plus, anti-fascist teens versus a self-described Proud Boy member running for a Kansas school board seat. But first, ambulances late, paramedics quitting, what Sedgwick County is doing to protect you. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. We begin with what was still a developing story at the time we recorded this episode, the resignation Friday of the embattled Sedgwick County EMS Director, Dr. John Gallagher. The county had placed him on administrative leave earlier in the week and was actively already seeking a replacement after a series of Wichita Eagle articles outlined multiple problems in the department, leading to ambulances doubling and more than the national standard for arrival times. And the county having so many unfilled EMT and paramedic positions that it frequently is running out of ambulances to respond to calls. The county commission voted to accept Gallagher's resignation in a special meeting Friday, effective immediately. The county will pay Gallagher a little over $85,000 in a settlement. That's about 4.5 months of salary. It will name an official interim EMS director next week. And here to join us to mull all of this over, we have Diane Leffler with the Wichita Eagle, who I know you've been on this story all day. We will talk about that in a minute. And John Wright, news director at KQAM. Thank you both for being here. So what's the latest on this still developing story? What is it that the public really needs to know?
Well, I think what the public really needs to know is that reform is coming. And reform is coming because of news reporting. Chance Swaim, my colleague Chance Swaim, and Michael Stavola have been working on this story for months, and the things that they found were simply hair curling. You know, there just have been so many incidences and so many problems with that department that there are, as you said, not enough ambulances on the street. There were many questionable calls made in terms of how to treat patients. Response times are through the roof. And this is just an example of a department that had gone badly haywire. And this, I think, is the first step in getting it fixed.
And John, before we started, you and I were talking about how this department used to be one of the ones that was held up as a national standard.
Yes, response times beating national standard, always raising the bar for other departments all across the country. And now, recently, due to ineffective management, we're seeing it trending the other direction. And as Diane mentioned, we have people, lives at stake. Fortunately, in my personal circumstances, I can't say enough about those men and women that roll up in those ambulances and get right to it. Seeing them on accident scenes, in home, very smart, very dedicated men and women out there. Yes. They deserve better. And unfortunately, the people in charge, when I say that, elected officials, fell down on the ball on this one.
No. And certainly, I think you and I both have had those personal experiences with EMTs, with family emergencies. There isn't a person in this county who's not impacted by this story. And several outside of the county.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an important thing. When you need an ambulance, you need an ambulance. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not something where you can like mess around and wait, and you know, those kind of problems are just unconscionable. And like John, I'll give maximum props to the people who are actually going on these calls, because they seem to be very committed to, providing the best care that they can when they get there, but they got to get there. No. And this is, this has been an ongoing problem, like I say, that took months to unravel. Mm-hmm. And, it's just, there's just no good way to spin this.
No. Well, and I know one of the root causes of this was about 2.5 years ago, they took two separate positions and merged them into one. And now they're talking about they're planning on separating those again and kind of going back to where they were in 2019.
Yeah, well, things were better in 2019. Another thing that's going to happen too is They've already been contacted by many of the people who left the department because of Dr. Gallagher's management of it, who are indicating that they would be willing to come back now. So we may have some movement on that front as far as getting those ambulances staffed. We're putting 15, 16 ambulances on the street when we should be having 21 or 22.
No.
And that's not a good situation. Just anecdotally, but I've noticed too that that some of the ambulances seem to be going a little faster these days. I was off last week, so I was driving around town a lot, and the number of times that you saw an ambulance go by full lights and sirens, I really didn't, it seemed better than it was before.
All right. Well, this is a story that is still developing. I'm sure we have not heard the end of it, and we'll be talking about it again. So we're going to move on and look at our next topic as we move from the county to the city of Wichita. A fight now brewing over a proposal to privatize management of Century 2 and the city's golf courses. The Wichita Eagle reported this week that buried in the city's proposed $670 million budget for next year is a plan to privatize management of Century 2 and the city's 4 golf courses. The proposed budget was posted online Friday, and by Tuesday, the privatization plan already had vocal opposition. Celeste Reset, leader of the Save Century 2 movement, scoffed at the idea that contracting out management would cut costs and improve customer service. She pointed to the Wichita Ice Center, privatized back in 2012, saying, "Enhanced customer service? Is that what you heard from the women who spoke to you on the agenda about the awful customer service at the Wichita Ice Rink Center?" Reset asked the council. "They told you about broken scoreboards, plywood covering holes, mold on the walls, broken lights, and broken shower heads." And Diane, this was your story. You were there. You heard what Reset had to say to the council. Describe what you heard. I think you used the word fiery.
Oh yeah, I think that it was very, I think that, it's really interesting because the council is tending to maybe treat her like the people who, come in and complain about things all the time, which kind of she does. But on the other hand, this is a woman who organized a petition drive that gathered 17,000 signatures to try to put an initiative on the ballot to save Century 2. Personally, I'm pretty agnostic about buildings. I think the real question here is, what is the purpose of Century 2? What is the purpose of the golf courses? Is it to be, Century 2, for example, is it to be a municipal auditorium that provides relatively inexpensive entertainment to the masses, or should it be a profit center for an outside company with probably some small amount of money going to the city? You're looking at a difference between having a facility that provides low-cost entertainment versus a facility that's trying to, that will raise prices. I mean, there's no question there. So it's going to be an interesting discussion as this continues.
Yeah, definitely will perhaps show some of the divide in ideas and policy thoughts from the council members as we're moving into this coming election, because the idea of privatization of public properties has grown steam over the last couple of decades, and now there seems to be increasing pushback against it as people are seeing how it works.
Now, personally, there are several organizations, many organizations in town that use Century 2 as a place where community events and activities. This is what Wichita generally is all about. I still think that people haven't quite grasped the idea of privatization, with a company coming in from outside the city and trusting that that organization or entity will do what they say will do. And that's going to be a tough sell if that goes any further as far as any type of election, any type of referendum. Because frankly, Midwest people look at things a little different, and lifelong Wichitans look at community involvement, keeping young people active. Century 2 needs to, no doubt, be enhanced, be maybe remodeled from the inside, maybe keep the facade upgraded. There are other facilities around the country that have done that. Why not Century 2? And I'll tell you, well, I won't get going, but there's another big building in town, facility in town that needs renovation, extremely bad. But it's definitely something that if it comes to a vote, I think it's going to be a tough sell for privatization.
And especially with the election coming up, council members are definitely going to be paying maybe a little bit more attention right now.
Yeah, some of them will. We got 3 up on the ballot, so. But the yeah, it's you know, there's. Let me draw an example. When COVID hit, the first thing they did was, well, they closed down Century 2 because you couldn't have events there. They turned the basement into a station for disinfecting the ambulances for the county. Intrust Bank Arena is privately managed, so they were able to stage one of the first major COVID vaccine station there, but they had to open it up and close it down to work around Thunder hockey games. So it's you know, it's the difference between having a building that serves the public interest and having a building that serves private interest.
That the public has access to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through Sedgwick County, correct?
Yeah.
And if not, if that had been a privatization group, maybe not, that may not have happened as quickly. Maybe it would have happened, but not a quick pivot to get those things done.
Yeah. And this is an issue that, as we're watching the COVID pandemic kind of surge again, may come up again.
Yeah.
Well, we do have something else to talk about that is really kind of raising some eyebrows. We've all heard of the Proud Boys, especially after January 6th and everything that happened to the Capitol building in D.C. But there is a Haven school board candidate who, according to his social media and according to recent news reports, says he is a Proud Boy and he's not going to pull out of running for office. The Kansas Reflector this week reporting that a group called the Midwest Youth Liberation Front documented comments from Josh Wells, a self-identified white nationalist who is running for the Haven School Board, and then published them on Twitter. Based on Wells' own social media accounts, the Reflector reports that he describes himself as the leader of a Proud Boys group, promotes an all-white nation state, and peddles false conspiracy theories about a financial plot behind the pandemic, as well as how police instigated the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. The Reflector says Wells responded to requests for a comment on their story by texting, "No thanks." However, on Twitter, he did respond to it, threatening lawsuits both against the teens who shared his messages and the nonprofit news organization itself for theft by deception, copyright infringement for using his business logo, and libel, among other things. Wells, whose own children do not attend the Haven schools, filed for the seat currently held by Ken Nisley, who is seeking re-election. There is so much there to discuss, but one is the Proud Boys are recognized as a hate group in this country and in Kansas. It kind of just boggles the mind that somebody is out there publicly saying, I am a member of this group and I want to be on the school board.
Well, if anything, over the last 4 years have taught us, maybe not so much of a surprise. What we fail to remember in these cases, Kansas had many sundown towns where if you were a person of color, if you were a resident or in an area you're visiting, you had to leave by sundown or else. And nothing has changed since the 1800s about the attitudes of white supremacists to keep a control over government, education, finances, and people are still talking about reparations. To deny any type of reparations for those ancestors who were slaves. And this is something that has to be solved, and I don't think politicians are able to grasp it. This is going to have to be another one of those movements, and there are a whole alphabet list of movements. But we have to have some responsible people from all sides working on this. It just can't be one over here and one over there, and we have the extreme right, extreme left. There's extreme members on both sides, and the amount of misinformation and disinformation is mind-boggling. And you can get a conversation at a local coffee shop, at a restaurant, amongst your peers about this, and it's just mind-boggling how much disinformation is out there. that is readily eaten by people who should know better. And citizens have to be more diligent. Government officials can't do it. The citizens are looking to the government to do it, and those representatives, some maybe can handle it, others maybe not handling it as well as we see all the way from local politics, state, and on to the government. And the cycle is just repeating itself, and where's it going to stop? Here we have a local politician, an area politician, in a town that is near, in Reno County, and the city of Hutchinson, that is multicultural. Wow. And point two, try to gather my thoughts here, how can you run for a school board that your children aren't part of a district? You're homeschooling, okay? Hopefully the citizens will get into the details. As they say, the devil is in the details, and they will ferret out and vote accordingly to their conscience. It would be detrimental to that county and citizenry to see it go down that way. That's just my opinion, but it's just a situation that it's sad that after all this time, we're still facing the same battles that keep coming back again and again and again.
No. That?
Well, I'll be very interested to see how this election turns out, because these attitudes are endemic to Kansas, and school board races tend to be very low turnout. So I think that, where this might be a disqualifier in another race, it could be an asset, frankly, in some races. And I can't tell you enough about the Haven School District's voting population to tell you how that's going to break.
No.
But there's been a lot of publicity around this guy, and that could bring out the for want of a better word, the white supremacist vote. So this could go either way.
Yeah. Well, and it seems that, at least from reading his social media posts, the ones that I have seen, that critical race theory is the big issue that he's running on. And that is certainly something that he is not the only politician in Kansas bringing that up. It goes all the way up to the governor's race.
Yes, but it hasn't even been talked about. It has not even been introduced in public schools. It's barely being discussed within the committees, educational communities and such. So I think we're getting the cart above the horse. To me, it's one of those red herrings, red flags that's going up. Okay, let's distract and deflect and disinform. We're way ahead of ourselves here on this issue.
Well, and the people who are arguing critical race theory and that it's bad don't even understand what it is.
Exactly. My point.
Critical race theory is a very academic discipline that is only generally taught in graduate level courses or in law school about, it's about analyzing how racism has affected our laws and continues to affect them.
Yeah.
And, so they've sort of redefined critical race theory to include basically anything that has to do with inclusion or tolerance. And, so yeah, those things are being taught in schools.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you define the term widely enough, then, it's an appeal to racism, frankly.
Well, this will definitely remain a race for us to watch. And watching races is one thing that is heavily affected by our next topic. How much say should you have in drawing new districts for your state lawmakers? Some groups say you're not getting enough input into the process, as Rebecca Chung of the KSN Capitol Bureau shows us.
Lawmakers are meeting here at the State House to draw up lines for next year's elections. But some groups say these are more than just lines. They decide how each district's vote is represented. And that's why they say everyone should have an opportunity to participate.
This is like messing with somebody's bank account, right? Everybody's a little touchy when you're messing with your own district.
That's why some Kansas groups are pushing for transparency and representation in the voting process. Lawmakers are meeting at the Kansas State House to draw up new lines that will decide how each district's vote is counted.
The people that we elect reflect the knowledge and the needs of the folks that they're there to serve.
Amy Hyten with the Topeka Independent Living Resource Center says making hearings more accessible to people that are disabled is a start in the right direction.
Making sure that there's wheelchair access. It's harder for folks who have limited mobility.
That's just one of the things several Kansas commissions are asking lawmakers to keep in mind. They're also calling for translators for people with language barriers and holding meetings at night and on the weekends for people that have to work during the week. Lawmakers say accurate representation is a priority on both sides of the aisle.
You're dividing up a neighborhood or a particular community of interest, and you kind of find those things out with these public meetings.
But some groups say taking up some of those extra steps to make sure everyone's included will go a long way.
Those are all real fundamental to our democratic process, and they're really important to folks with disabilities, to folks with all kinds of marginalizations.
Lawmakers approved 14 town hall meetings before they draw up lines next year where people can come in person or submit their input in writing. And the date for these town halls has not yet been set. At the Capitol, I'm Rebecca Chung.
And redistricting sometimes seems like this really boring technical issue, but it's very vital to the legislative process and the amount of input that the public has into what their lawmakers do.
Well, yeah, if you expect it to be fair and you expect it to be transparent, you are going to be bitterly disappointed. I covered this 10 years ago when they did it, and it was the most nakedly political activity by some of the most politicized people that I have ever seen. In Kansas, the fundamental rule here is that voters don't choose their politicians, politicians choose their voters. Now, in the past, it wasn't quite as bad as it is now because, you know, okay, well, like maybe a politician might say, well, I don't want this particular community because I know they'll vote against me. But now they've got this computerized. There are consultants that do these maps for them. This is granular to the point of they can practically predict how every election is going to turn out in the state.
Wow.
And so there really isn't, you know, there isn't going to be any transparency. There isn't going to be any, you know, somebody's going to sit down at a computer and they're going to draw a map designed specifically to protect Republican dominance in this state for the next 10 years and probably long thereafter. And the Democrats will kick up a little bit of a fuss, but they don't really care either because they all get safe districts and so they can be, you know, senator or representative for life if they want to be.
And we've seen some of those.
And we definitely have seen it, and I cannot argue one point Don just made as far as redistricting and drawing these lines and bringing that down into the local level. We've seen redistricting and redlining and with financial institutions and boundaries with school board changes from as far back as you can remember in the 60s and previous to that. So the public, as I mentioned earlier on another topic, has to get involved here. Citizenry has to turn out to these public meetings and cut through all of that red tape, to cut through a lot of that information that is not going or being released. They're going to have to press and push to get that. And one thing that I heard and read that really caught my attention, why are the government having meetings during work hours when you, me, and everyone else has to go earn a living from 9 to 5, and why are you making decisions without an input from the community? And so we're going to have 14 meetings. Now, that's going to depend on where these meetings are going to be, what time, what access do people have. There's no ramp, so handicapped people may not be able to get in to attend these meetings. So as Diane mentioned, it's already a stacked deck. And the only option the public has is to get to these meetings and make their voices known, but it just may fall on deaf ears and we'll be in the same election cycle and the same people will get elected again and again.
Well, we've got one more thing to talk about, so we're going to cut that conversation short here. As millions of Americans are hitting the roads and taking to the skies once again, a Wichita couple has a warning for you about a scam on travelers that could endanger your life. It's called digital kidnapping. It began like any other vacation for Paul and Elena, fun in the sun, catching up with family in Mexico after the long COVID-enforced break.
It didn't even enter our minds that this was a possibility to happen to us.
But everything changed on their second to last day with a single knock on their hotel room door.
He put a cell phone in my hands. Then he simply motioned for me to listen to it.
Not understanding the rapid Spanish, Paul handed the phone to his wife.
The next thing I knew, she was grabbing me by my shirt and pushing me down to the floor in the bathroom.
Lo primero que me dijeron esas personas que era el cartel de Sinaloa.
The caller threatening her father's life if the couple didn't do exactly as they were told.
Me hicieron creer que nos estaban viendo, que a mi papá lo describieron.
This was the beginning of a 7.5-hour ordeal as the kidnappers demanded ransom money from both the couple and Elena's family.
And at that point, I was pretty sure we were going to be killed.
While the kidnappers warned Paul and Elena not to make any other calls on their cells, Paul happened to have his iPad as well and sent a distress signal to his brother in Wichita.
He immediately understood it.
Their family here calling Officer Paul Cruz with the Wichita Police Department.
As an officer, I have not investigated a type of case like this before.
Who quickly got federal officials in Wichita and Mexico involved, kicking off a rescue operation.
Their safety was our #1 concern.
While staying in contact with the couple by messenger.
I've never been so happy to see his face in my life.
Paul and Elena are still struggling to put that day behind them, but want to warn the public this could happen to you too.
This happens to people every day. And it, I guess, never crossed our minds as a possibility to even be worried about that kind of thing.
He advises have a plan before you go, including what a distress signal would look like. Bring along an extra electronic means of communication like that iPad he used, and
agree ahead of time that if you don't check in, that is an automatic emergency.
This is a story that really shocked me. And just a quick note, we did not use last names because the couple is trying to protect family they still have down in Mexico. Scams like this have been proliferating over the last few years, last couple of decades, but this one is a whole new twist and a lot more dangerous. And I certainly had never heard anything like it before.
No, I don't think any of us have, but yeah, this is bad.
Yep.
You're already vulnerable when you're traveling in a foreign country. Mm-hmm. Because you don't know your way around. I mean, that's the whole point of going there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that's the fun part. But unfortunately, it's also now the dangerous part, and it's happening in every country in the world, from what we're hearing.
And they were very good advice. Make sure you take those steps to keep yourself and your others, people that love you, safe, so they know where you are.
Well, thank you both for being with us. I hope you have enjoyed our discussion. I certainly have. Thank you as well, and we hope you stay safe and have a great week.